Hey guys, Suraj here again from Amra Siksha. I really hope my last video, which is how to create a baseline and how to make a baseline for a beat structure, helped y'all. And I also please do recommend y'all to go check my previous videos. Whoever has not seen how to produce house music, where I've taught a beat structure, a very simple beat structure, and then how to do equalization and what is equalization and etc. etc. Please do go ahead and just see those videos before you coming down to this video, because everything is interlinked so that you would understand this video much better if you have seen the previous videos. So today's topic is really an interesting one. It's a very simple process, but it does help you all in a lot many ways if you're considering to make your kick and bass line sound better, not just for kick and bass line but also for some other reasons as well. But today I'm just gonna show how in a kick and a bass line it is gonna sound better. I'm talking about what is sidechaining. Sidechaining is a process in which, let's say that your bass line and your kick is sounding equally loud, but then the moment your bass line comes in, your kick kind of ducks back and it loses its energy. It is no more as loud as it sounded by itself. The moment you put in a bass line, your kick ducks back and it has not got enough energy in front of the bass. So scenarios like this, what you would do is you would want to EQ or you would want to play around with the volume. But if you EQ, you're losing the fundamental frequencies of the bass, because what you're supposed to do there is you're just supposed to cut all the lows and your kick will sound bright. But that's not what you want to do with the bass line, because bass line you need those lower frequencies. And if you're playing around the volume, obviously what you're going to do is you're going to reduce the bass line's volume. Again, that is not what we want to achieve, because you want your kick and your bass line to be at the same volume, the same amplitude. So now situations like this and scenarios like this, we will use a process called sidechaining. Let me just quickly go ahead and make the beats and the bass line, and I will explain you how to do the process of sidechaining. And for this process, you will need a plugin or a VST, a processing VST called Compressor. And I'm not going to use any fancy VSTs or fancy compressors such as Waves or any other external plugins. All I'm going to do is Ableton stock in the stock plugins. I'm pretty damn sure if you're using other DAWs such as Logic, Reaper, everything has their own inbuilt compressor, and I'm for sure they have their own sidechaining processor as well. So now quickly what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go and add a limiter in my master channel so that I don't peak or distort, a digital distort. So I'm just going to quickly go ahead. Okay, I think I already have one. No, I already have one. So I'm just going to delete this. Good that I already have one. So now I'm going to go to my drums. The same whatever I did in my previous video, I'm just going to do the same thing. And I'll do it super quick so that you guys don't get bored. Creating my kick in every beat, and then now I'm gonna go create my snap. I'm gonna keep the beat structure again simple, not too many fancy things. So this is my beats. I'm gonna keep it to 1.5 dB. Now I'm gonna go to my instruments, because instruments is the place where you'll find your bass line. And I'm gonna go to my club line. I'm gonna make a MIDI bar again, and I'm gonna create the same notation which I did again the last time. Okay, so now I'm gonna play y'all first the kick and snare for 4 bars, and then I'm gonna play it along with the bass line. Now if you see, my kick is tight, my snare is sounding brilliant, but now I'm gonna play it along with my bass line. If you actually noticed my snare sounded the way it did, but my kick kind of, it just lost some energy there. It just took one seat behind. It is not that the kick is taking one seat behind, but it is because the bass is overpowering the kick. So now, as I told, you can't go and EQ this. If you have to EQ it, you'll have to cut the lower frequency. The moment you do that, the fundamental frequencies of the bass is lost. So that's no more acting as a bass line, which you do not want to do. The other thing is, what I can do is, now I'm gonna play this again and I'm gonna lower the volume of my bass. My kick is back, but then if you really notice, my bassline's energy is gone right now, so you do not want to do that either. Now I'm barely hearing my bassline and it's not giving me that lower feel. It just sounds like another synth lead, so which I do not want to do. Instances like this or situations like this is when you'll be using this process called sidechaining. So now, how do you do this sidechain? For that, you need a VST, which is a virtual studio technology, or a processing plugin called Compressor. And where do you find that? If you had seen my previous video in which I had named it as Ableton Overview, that's where I explained you what is drums, what is instruments, what is audio effects, what are MIDI effects, and etc. etc. Now I'm gonna show you something in audio effects. Audio effects is the place where you're gonna find your stock built-in plugins by Ableton. All the plugins which you see here have been built by Ableton. No external plugins, no any fancy plugins or anything as such. Now I'm gonna use this processor called Compressor. Compressor can do a lot of things. It can play a lot of roles. Most of the people take it in a wrong way, thinking that compressor is a processor which is just to increase your volume. No, that's wrong. Compressor can do a lot of things. It can limit, it can sidechain, it can shape your sound. Yes, of course, it can shape your sound. Most of y'all are wondering, how can it shape my sound? It can shape your sound. There are a lot of ways if you play around with the attack, release and ratio and your threshold and your output and etc. etc. So it is used in a lot many ways, but most of the people don't really experiment it. I'm gonna show you one way for now, and then I will take it in the next session, or when I'm teaching about only audio effects, I will teach in depth what all compressor can be done. But now I'm just gonna teach you what is sidechaining in compressor. For you to sidechain the bassline, is what it really means in layman terms is, I want the kick to be heard and also the bassline not to lose its energy. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to add the sidechaining process on my bassline, and I'm going to route my kick's amplitude to my sidechaining process, which means all I'm going to tell is, I'm going to tell the sidechaining processing plugin that, hey bro, just see, I want the bassline to have its energy, but I do not want its energy to be the same when the kick is playing. So what I want you to do is, I want you to duck it down when the kick is playing. That is all the processing plugin of sidechain does. So whenever the kick is played, the bassline is ducked down. I'm gonna show you in practical how that's done. So for that, you need to drag and drop your compressor on your bassline. The moment you drag and drop, you see the compressor which has fallen right beneath here on my right hand bottom side. So now you don't see anywhere sidechaining here. The reason is, you haven't expanded the plugin by itself. So you see this down arrow, click on it. The moment you click on that, it expands the compressor plugin. It just shows you another small window in which now you see sidechain. Click on the sidechain. The moment you click on the sidechain, it is asking audio from, which means what audio do you require, and when this audio plays, this is where your bassline will duck down. I want my kick. But if you really notice something here, in this MIDI track, I have my kick and snare. I just don't have my kick and snare. So for this reasons, you need to have your drum kits in individual track. Your kick should be in one individual track, your snare should be in one individual track, and so on. Now I'm gonna duplicate this track. The moment I duplicate, I'm gonna rename this as kick. I will show you why now renaming is important. I'm gonna rename this as kick. I'm gonna rename this as snare. And now I'm going to go to this MIDI track, which I've named it kick. I do not want my snare to be present here. I'm going to delete that and I'm going to duplicate that. As simple as that. I'm going to come to the MIDI track, which I've named it as snare. and I'm gonna delete my kick from here because that's a MIDI track which I've named it as snare. So I don't want my kick to be present there. And this I'm gonna rename it as bass. As simple as that. Now come back to your bass line on which you have dragged and drop your compressor. Audio from, you see here it gives you a bunch of channels, and now I know that this is my kick because I've named it as my kick. Otherwise I would be confused. I would not know which is my kick channel. I would select my snare and I would be wondering why it's not ducking down when the kick is played. That is the reason why you need to rename your channels, so it helps you out in situations like this. I'm gonna click the kick, and now you see something called post FX here. I want it to be pre FX. The reason why pre FX is I want the sidechain process and the kick to act before the baseline and not after the baseline. If you're clicking post FX, then all of these processing is happening after the baseline, which we do not want, because I want the baseline to duck in when the kick is playing. I do not want the baseline to duck in after the kick is played. Correct? I want it to duck down when the kick is playing on the dot. For this particular reason is why you choose pre-FX and not post-FX, because pre is nothing but before, post is nothing but after. So you need the kick and your processing unit to act before the baseline is played, so that it tells you, okay kick, you're supposed to duck down at this interval because the baseline is also playing there. So that is why you choose pre-FX. If you're choosing post-FX, the outcomes of post-FX is you might lose the shape of your kick, and you might also lose the crunch and the tightness of the bass. So it's just gonna meddle around with your transients and etc, and your bassline is also not gonna sound good, your kick is also not gonna sound good, which you do not want to do. So reasons for that, you're gonna add pre-FX. The moment you add pre-FX, that's not about it. There's one more step which you have to do, which you'll have to get your threshold below. This threshold is nothing but it tells the kick how much to duck the bass down. So for now, I'm going to leave the threshold at 0 and I'm going to play it. Nothing is happening because the threshold is at 0, and because I've told my kick, hey kick, listen, don't duck down because you are at 0 dB. Now I want the kick to duck down as much as possible, so I'm going to reduce the threshold to certain dB. If you see here below, this is where your dB reading is. So I'm gonna, if I see it's minus 35.3. Now I'm gonna play it. If you see here, this is where your kick is ducking down the bass line. And also if you really noticed, now my kick has come back to its energy. My kick has really come back to its energy, and my bass line also sounds better. Now I'm gonna play it with my bass line volume higher. Also, your bass line is much groovier right now. I'm gonna play your bass line. I'm just gonna solo the bass line. I'm only gonna play the bass line with the sidechaining on. You see that it's kind of got that wobbly, wow, kind of, wobbly, thing to it. And I kind of feel it's much better right now. It's become more groovy. Now I'm just gonna turn it off after 3 to 4 seconds for you to understand how it sounds with the sidechaining and how it sounds without the sidechaining. See, simple, and it just made your bass much more better. It just made it it just made it stand out. And if also by not reducing the energy of your kick has also got back its energy. This is one trick which most of the engineers or most of the producers use. Right now I've just taught you using a kick and bass line, because this is where most of them suffer. The moment they put in a bass line, they barely hear their kick and they're wondering what is happening. So that is why I wanted to stress on the kick and the bass. But you can use this for a lot of other things. For example, let's tell you have string sections. What do I mean by string sections is you have your violins, your tremolos, your cellos, and all of these ensemble kind of violins and strings, and you have your vocals. But then you feel that your vocals are not standing out when the ensemble part comes in at full. So what you could do is you could put a sidechain on your ensemble strings and get the audio in of your vocals, like how I got the kick after putting my sidechain in my bass. And you can reduce it very minute so that the vocal stands out a bit when your ensemble is played. See, right now what I've done here with the thresh is very intensive because I want y'all to see the difference. So that is why I've done it super intensive. When you're using it for your vocals or etc., don't do it so intensive because it'll look really ugly, because you don't want your ensemble to duck in the moment your vocals come in, and you don't want it to be too much. You just want it slightly so that your vocal stands out a little bit. All you have to do is just get down your threshold by minus 10 dB or minus 5 dB, and that's about it. Your sweet spot is somewhere around minus 17 to minus 18. I wouldn't recommend more than that, other than situations like your bass and kick. If it's your bass and kick, then you're free to do as many as reduce it as much as possible. But for other things like your vocals and ensembles, or your synths and your electric guitars and things like that, just do it very minute, because you do not want people to hear a drastic change when the sidechain is coming in, because they will also find out that something went wrong there. According to human listeners, they would feel that something went wrong, and they wouldn't like that kind of an effect all of a sudden in a track. So that's about sidechaining. I hope you really understood. To make it much more simpler, what sidechaining is for most of y'all who still didn't understand, I'm just gonna make a small drawing. And this drawing is not that great because I'm not a sketch artist or anything. I'm just gonna make it super simple. Now this is my bass line. Okay, this is my bass line, and this bass line is so overpowered that the kick, which is small, is not being heard at all. This is my kick. I'll just change the color of this. This is my kick, and my kick is so small and it's not as powerful as my bass line, so it's not heard. This is the listener. This is the listener. So now my kick is not being heard to the listener at all. So for this, I'm gonna add in a processor called SideChain. I'm gonna, put this in black. I'm gonna add SideChaining here on my bass line, not on your kick. Again, you're gonna add it on your bass line. The moment I add my sidechain and I get the threshold down, what it's gonna do is it is just gonna duck down the bass wherever the kick is there. For example, like this. It just ducks down. The bass is ducked down wherever the kick is present. The rest of the places, the bass remains the same. It's not ducking down completely. It just ducks down wherever the kick is present, because I'm getting in the signal from the kick and not any other element. So that is why you need to have your kick in a separate channel. You do not want to have your entire drums in a channel, because the moment if entire elements are there, all the elements will fall into the audio. You do not want it to duck down when the hi-hats are playing or when the snare is playing. You just want it to duck down when the kick is playing. So that is why you put the kick in a different channel. Now, just creates itself with space. Now if you see, there is enough space for the kick to go in, and also the energy of the bassline is also retained at other places. It only ducks down when the kick is played. So now the listeners can hear the bass at its max volume, and also they don't feel like the kick is gone or lost. They also hear the kick. This is just a small illustration why you use a sidechaining process, because most of the people would not understand by just looking at the plugins. There are few people who we have to, teach them in much more, more specific way. And I hope now everyone has understood what sidechaining is. And thanks. Please do subscribe, like, comment to my channel. Amanra Siksha is not a channel which we market ourselves and tell that we're doing things, and etc, etc. I don't want to specifically name all of the other things, but this is a channel which is purely for education, and we just want to help out people who are really in need of learning music production. They couldn't do it probably because of financial age, or they're doing some other education and their parents are not agreeing. So at situations like that, all you could do is just pop up Aman Ra Shiksha and just see a 10-minute or 30-minute videos. Yes, of course, I do a longer videos and not small videos. The reason is I just want everyone to understand what I do. I just don't want to just come in for 5 minutes and walk out. I really treat this YouTube channel or any digital medium like my classroom, where I see 10 to 20 students sitting and listening to me. That's how I you know kind of try explaining it. So please do share this channel to people who really wanna understand and learn music production or any processing. My next video would probably be how to process your vocals, or as a voiceover artist, how do you EQ your vocals, how do you clean your vocals. So I haven't decided that yet, but I hope that's what I'll be doing next. So if you find anyone like that who really needs to know all of these, please share it as much as you can, and let's educate, let's also learn. I'm also learning a lot of things. Lot many people are telling me things which I haven't heard, and I'm also googling, I'm also learning from books. I'm also calling up my professors and asking them, whoever knows the most. There are always people who knows more than you, for sure, that is for sure. So I call up people like that and ask what this is, and I try answering them back. I'm really loving this. So thank you again. Please share, like, and subscribe. And this is Aman Ra Shiksha, and I'm Suraj. Thank you so much.